I like to think of it in terms of a bridge, a footbridge. If it has no handrails on it, it's very scary to walk across a deep ravine, but you put some handrails there and you can run across that footbridge because there's a sense of freedom. And same with our children. If you've got the handrails on the bridge of life, the values that have been established, and the principles of living, then the child feels free to go the journey across that bridge of life.
Family Life Australia presents Marriage and Family Life, a program of practical advice and encouraging stories to bring you hope and to enrich your marriage and family life.
Joining me in the studio today are Dr. Ian and Dr. Helene Richardson. They both are teachers and counselors and, most importantly, parents. And that's what we're going to talk to them about today, styles of parenting. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Eric. Good to be with you.
Okay, parents, 5 children, is that right?
Yes, 5 children.
Our eldest just turned 37.
Okay, so you've been in the parenting game for a while.
Yes.
Okay, and you're passing on your wisdom to others, and I'm very thankful for that. Recently, I listened to your parenting seminar, and you talked about the different styles of parenting, and we're going to walk through those in just a few moments. But before we get to the different styles of parenting, I wanted to ask you about how you started off your parenting seminar. You kind of said that each of the parents should picture their child at 20 years old and what you want them to be ideally at that age.
Yep.
Now, why did you start off that way?
I think parents don't have a long-term goal. They look at this child and they go in the moment, never thinking about what a child might turn out to be. And I think a lot of parents too are quite lenient when the child is young, and then find that when they get to teenage years, their children are running amok and they don't know how to rein them in, but it's too late. So you actually need to know when they're young what values you want to instill in them, so that when they come to those troubled years, they've got some values that they can fall back on.
And as Proverbs says, train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he's old, he'll not depart from it. If you don't know what the old is, how are you going to train them up to get there? What are you going to train them to be? So it's not about professions. And some cultures and some people are more concerned about what professions their children are going to be. But what we're talking about here and what the scripture talks about for us is character, how we want our children to be, not what we want our children to be in terms of
Occupation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted children who were honest, who had integrity, who could stand up for themselves, who could love other people as well as themselves. So those kinds of things we started to try and instill into our children.
But you're not going to get there unless you actually picture that ideal to strive for.
That's right.
Now, in your styles of parenting, you teach that different styles will have different outcomes.
That's right.
Oh, it's kind of scary when you think about it. We can affect the outcome when they're young adults.
And we as parents are models to our children. So inevitably what we do and how we respond to them is how they're going to turn out the other end as well. And too often parents are willing to say what to do, but do something different themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Children learn by seeing more than hearing.
That's right. That's a humbling thought, but we as parents have tremendous influence. Okay, we're going to walk through 4 different styles of parenting. We're going to start off with the most dysfunctional, kind of the don't let this happen to you, and kind of work our way up to the ideal, the most balanced one.
Or if you find yourself in this situation, then you need to find some help.
That is a good point, yes. So we all are short of the ideal, but hopefully knowing what the ideal is can help us on our journey. Okay, so probably the worst case scenario of don't let this happen to you is the uninvolved parent. And before we even get to that, we should picture 2 continuums. Well, one extreme is a very unresponsive parent, and the other extreme is a very responsive parent. And the other continuum is demanding and undemanding. So if somebody is an uninvolved parent, they would be very undemanding of their children and very unresponsive. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, that's the 2 worst extremes, the undemanding and unresponsive parent. I was just thinking about this and thinking that there are a couple of ways you can be uninvolved. You can be so involved in what you're doing yourself that you're not involved with your child. Or there are those parents who have had abuse in their own backgrounds, who have not had responsive and demanding parents themselves, who have been damaged, and they become unresponsive and undemanding of their children. And they back off. They don't respond when the child needs help. They don't respond when the child is hungry. And so the child grows up in pain too.
Okay, so how this works in practical reality, say the child of an uninvolved parent comes home and has a terrible school mark. An uninvolved parent, just indifferent, or how would they respond?
Probably wouldn't care.
Yeah, wouldn't care about it.
Whatever.
The poor grade is probably due to the undemandingness of the parent as well, in some respects.
Okay, so they're just being taught that good, bad, indifferent, it doesn't really matter.
And not having any involvement with the child in the child's life. So there's this sense of separatedness from the child. I think of that because we all make mistakes in all of these areas, throughout. There's no such thing as the perfect parent. And I think of a time when I was so busy in ministry that I just didn't have time for the children. And one of our children, we found them sitting down in the kitchen and so detached from me, wanting my attention but not getting it. And I caught them with the scissors in their pyjamas, ready to cut a big hole in them.
Oh, wow.
And I was just about ready to be
very demanding?
The very demanding.
Yes.
And realised, oh, hang on. He's doing this because they want my attention, not because they're trying to be naughty here. I had to really take a back step and say, gosh, I haven't had the responsiveness to my kids because I've been so busy doing everything else, helping other people.
Preparing a sermon on love?
Yeah, one time preparing my sermon on love, and one of my kids came in, Dad, want to play cricket? Haven't got time to play cricket. Dad, want to play cricket? Can't you see I'm so busy preparing this message on love?
That's interesting how we can fall into those traps. So it sounds like indifference is almost like a form of abuse in a way.
Yes, it is. Neglect is one of the worst forms of abuse. Yeah.
And talking about outcomes, if you want a 20-year-old who is happy and healthy, obviously this is not the approach to parenting. So what type of outcome do you usually have if you're an indifferent, uninvolved parent?
There could be a couple of extremes. You could have a very depressed child, or you could have a very angry child. They will often end up with very poor grades at school, often end up on drugs. They would be often the kids who are on the streets and don't go home.
Every child needs love, acceptance, forgiveness, nurture. The unresponsive parent gives none of that.
They're striving for that.
They're striving for it, and they grow up with this deficiency. And hence, if they haven't been nurtured, they don't know how to nurture anybody else, and they don't know how to nurture themselves. And so then they get into codependent relationships later on because they're looking for somebody else to give to them what they need to be able to give to themselves, and we only learn that from the way our parents respond to us.
Every child needs to be attended to when their nappies are wet or dirty, when they're hungry, when they've hurt themselves, and an unresponsive parent often will be unaware of that child's need. And so an attachment to the parent doesn't develop properly, and then they don't learn to regulate their emotions properly. They don't learn how to think properly through situations, so they just grow up living in the moment and very impulsive.
And sometimes it's not the parent's fault. I mean, if
No.
there's a member of the family dying of cancer, obviously all the attention goes to the sick member of the family, and then unintentionally you just neglect a child.
So there's a range of scenarios, isn't there, as to how this could happen.
But if you think in terms of the pendulum, when the pendulum swings one way, it needs to come back to centre again. So there are times when we can't be responsive because of certain situations, as you're just talking about, and the pendulum has swung out to the side, but it's really important that the pendulum comes back to centre again, and that we provide that responsiveness that our children need.
And the thing is that any of us at any time can drift into that.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good lesson for us.
In fact, we could say that we all do.
Yes, I think that's a pretty safe assumption there. Now let's move to the next style of parenting, a little bit healthier, but still not quite there. That would be the permissive parent. So they would be undemanding.
But very responsive.
But very responsive. So going back to the scenario of the child coming home with a poor mark from school, probably high marks weren't demanded of them, wasn't expected.
They'd probably be told, oh, that's okay, you'll do better next time or whatever, maybe, don't worry too much about it. And they have few limits on their children, let their children do whatever they want.
And no expectation for the child to fulfil their potential. Just allow whatever will be, will be.
Okay, so not demanding, but very responsive. So if that child is sad about it or feels it's unfair, that mark, they would be very responsive to that.
Yes.
Yeah. And may then try and wrap their child in cotton wool and protect them and look after them.
May go to the school
Yeah.
and blame the school.
Okay, so that's not a good thing. But at least there's an element of caring and nurturing, and sometimes these parents are kind of buddy-buddy.
Yes.
Yeah, they're like best friends with their kids.
They don't want their children to not love them. Usually that's a motivation. They think if they're demanding, they might lose their child's love, but that's usually not the case.
Okay, so that's another example of don't let that happen to you, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Yes, it
that
is.
they care and
Yes.
are very responsive to any discomfort on the part of the child. The child knows that they're loved.
That's right. But they'll often still end up in high school not doing well and maybe running with the crowd or trying drugs as well.
Because the demandingness is the part that creates the values or sets the values that are there. And the child growing up with the responsiveness but not the demandingness, they know they're loved but they have no values.
Okay, and so the outcomes, just not really striving for high standards.
Not striving for anything and not really...
Lose their way.
Very easily lose their way.
So that's the permissive style. Better, but still not as healthy as you could be.
Yes.
We're talking to Dr. Ian and Dr. Helene Richardson, two doctors in the house today on the program talking about styles of parenting. We're working through 4 different ones. We have 2 more to go, 2 more that are demanding. And we demand that you stay tuned because we have a lot more for you on today's edition of Marriage and Family Life.
You're listening to Marriage and Family Life, presented by FamilyLifeAustralia.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us info@FamilyLifeAustralia.com or use our toll-free number 1800 358 6329.
And welcome back to Marriage and Family Life, where we're talking about styles of parenting with Dr. Ian and Dr. Helene Richardson. They are both teachers, counselors, and parents. Ian has a doctor's degree in ministry, majoring in counseling, and Helene has a PhD in psychology. So they certainly have studied this topic, but most importantly, they have a PhD in life, being parents of 5 children. So continuing our conversation about styles of parenting and the outcomes from the various styles of parenting, we should say just at the outset here that these are general tendencies. There's always exceptions.
Yeah. We also need to remember, too, there's no such thing as a perfect parent.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that, because we can really beat ourselves up if we kind of get into one of these styles, and we can fluctuate between any of these.
Yes, we do. In fact, we tend to utilise all of them, and sometimes we just use the wrong one at the wrong time as well.
Okay, we're going to move toward another one, which is very common, and a lot of times it's a response to the permissive style. Before the break, we were talking about the permissive style, where not really a whole lot is expected from the child, but the parent is very responsive to the child's needs. Now, a lot of times we respond to that saying, hey, there's got to be standards, let's raise the bar, and then you become a demanding parent. So isn't that just a great thing? Isn't that the answer to all these problems in parenting? If unresponsive and undemanding leads to problems, then let's just be demanding and authoritarian. Is that a good thing?
No, it's not.
Why did you leave out the responsiveness then, hey?
Oh, did I? Yeah, because that was not convenient for but that is a good point.
Demanding without responsiveness or without love, or the child doesn't feel love, they will respond and they will usually do what they're told. But eventually, with no love, they get angry on the inside, and they might do really well at school, but then they count down the days till they can leave home.
And the demanding without responsiveness is all about control. It's not about the child, but it's